episode of Cultivate. I am happy you're tuning in today for another conversation. I am excited about this conversation today because it's a personal one for me. And today I have two amazing guests. We have Caral and Taryn with us, and I am grateful for them, for their friendship, for who they are. And today we're actually going to be talking about daddy issues. Some of us have them, some of us don't. Some of us may have them and don't know we have them. But we are going to be having a personal conversation today, and I am glad and happy that you guys are joining me today for this special conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Thank you for having us.
It's a loaded conversation, question, subject, topic, so much to talk about, so many layers. Yes. So we're gonna just jump right into it. And you know, I feel like we sometimes hear the term daddy issues and we think of a specific situation or a specific type of issues somebody has, or a specific type of, you know, girl or whatever. But I think these issues come in different shapes and forms and backgrounds. And so I feel like sometimes we can think that it happens, or that daddy issues come from maybe your dad walked out on you, or he was a terrible person, or whatever. But sometimes it's just complicated relationships with your dad that, you know, turn into complicated things in your life. And so I know that that's something that's been true for you, Caral, because your relationship with your dad wasn't a bad one. You had a good dad, you had a present dad. So how did that look like for you?
I had the best dad. I think I still have a great dad, but growing up, I was still 16 years old, and literally, like, my dad would walk into the room and I would like jump in his arms, and he was like my real life hero. He was a great dad. My dad was a dad that if my mom wanted to go out, my dad would babysit all the kids. Like, we would all stay with him. He would play with us. He was a great dad. He provided for our family. But when I turned 17, he shared his secret with me, and it totally changed our relationship.
And what was his secret?
His secret was that he had a child, and my parents were separated. But I guess when I started...
So at that point, your parents were not together?
My parents were in the process of getting separated. So, like I said, my dad was amazing. My parents were getting separated. My dad stayed, you know, providing for our family, so my mom couldn't finish nursing school, so that she had a form of providing for us now that they weren't going to be married no more. And one day he calls me, he's like, hey, I have a secret. And I'm like, oh, like, I thought he was going to tell me he had a girlfriend because they were separated. And he's like, no, I have a son. Oh, no, he goes, you have a brother. I'm like, yeah, I know, I have it right there. It's like, no, like another brother. And I'm like, when did this happen? How old is this brother? Like, and he was a baby, but I started like...
So it had happened recently.
It had happened recently, but I had visited in Puerto Rico, and I visited his mom's house, and my dad was in the military, and at that time, for all the things to add up, he was stationed in Korea. So how do you have a baby in Puerto Rico when you're stationed in Korea? So I took the news hard, and then what was the worst part is that he told me not to tell my mom.
So you found out that, okay, not only did he have another child, but he had also been lying to you guys as to where he was at.
Yes. So he was supposed to be in Korea, you know, doing his military thing, and apparently maybe when he got time off, he went to Puerto Rico instead of visiting us.
That's a
and so he told you not to tell your mom.
And he told me not to tell my mom.
And so
for like a week, I didn't tell my mom, but I was angry. I was holding in something that I couldn't. Even my mom would be like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, nothing. What's wrong with you? And no, mom, nothing's wrong with me.
Did you ever ask him, like, are you going to tell my mom?
I did at the end. I go, when are you going to tell my mom this secret that you told me? And he's like, well, when I'm ready. And I'm like, well, I'm ready. I can't no more. And he said that he wasn't going to tell her, and I was the one who told her.
You told your mom?
I told my mom.
And how was that?
Oh, it was, she went like, what would your mom do? My mom went crazy. Like, and it wasn't about the kid thing. It was about telling me that and telling me to keep it, and like, how it affected me.
So, wow. And so how did that change now the dynamics with your dad?
I mean, when your dad is your first love, you know, for me it was the first person who actually like broke my heart.
Wow.
So
we're all gonna cry.
Yeah, you're good.
So I didn't know how to act. I was in church, but at that point, I just sat in church. I just sat there, and anything that was told to me, I was like, what for?
Yeah.
Right.
If your mom and your dad and one of them betrays you,
like, who can I trust?
Who do I trust?
Yeah. Yeah. What's real now?
Yeah.
You think that affected how you viewed God? Or what you thought of God? Or what you thought of, like, you know?
I don't think that affected, I don't know. I was also at a very different church where the way that they presented things, I was a teenager, was more like, you're going to tell me not to do that? Like, who are you? Like, that's a challenge. I'm going to do it now.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that put me in a little bit of a rebellious stage. And, you know, I seeked, you know, male attention other ways. And I wanted nothing to do with my dad. I didn't respect him. I thought he was a terrible person. But my mom was there telling me.
Did he ever apologize for that? Did he ever fully understand the effect it had on you? Has he? Does he know?
No, I don't think so.
Because he never apologized to you or seeked out that conversation, or you just...
He's never apologized to me. But I'm at the point where I don't need an apology from him.
Yeah, you're past that. You're already... Yeah. Kind of life moves on, and then you're here now. And how is your relationship with him now?
It's like you don't... You could forgive him. Right. You don't forget it. And you forgive every time. But it's a iffy relationship. It's keep not it at a minimum. I have no doubt that he loves me the same.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I love him still. He's my dad. But I wish things could be different.
It just looks different now. Yeah. How about for you, Taryn? How was your, relationship with your dad?
Well, so sorry, now I'm like, because of you. So I didn't grow up here with him, mostly because my parents were immigrants. So
yeah,
what they ended up doing is that they sent me and my sister to Nicaragua. But before, when I was 5, like before we left to Nicaragua, like he was very abusive. Like he drank, he was an alcoholic. And so my house was like a war zone every single time. And I don't remember a lot of it before, but when we came back, it was traumatic because...
So you lived away from him for that time?
For about 7 years.
Okay,
yeah.
Wow.
But I would tell my grandma, because I live with my grandma, and I would tell her, oh yeah, my dad hits my mom. And she would be like, what? And then so they would call, because they would call like every week. And so my grandma would ask him, like, hey, like your daughter said this. And they're like, no, that's not true. And then they would put me on the phone. I'm like, what are you talking about? Yes, you do. I remember this, and this. Wow. And they're like, no. So whatever. Then I fast forward 7 years. Then we come back because I was very nervous because I remember all of that. But they're like, no, my mom would say like, oh no, he's changed and all this stuff. But that wasn't true in the sense that he was still abusive. He was still an alcoholic. Wow. So he would drink, he would get violent. And so it just created a barrier because I always thought, oh, all men are like that. And so I just didn't trust him. And we would go to church every Sunday. So he used to play the little, everything is great. And I do remember...
Because he would go with you guys?
No, so technically he's actually a Catholic. So...
Oh, okay. So you were still over there and...
When we came back, like my mom would go to Christian church. And then my dad would go to Catholic church. And so we would go to church like normal on Sundays and then come back. Everything would go crazy again because it was like during the weekend or whatever. And it was just insane. And so it was like a lot of violence and all of that. And so I remember I would pray. I was like, Lord, please change him. And then my prayer turned in like, please kill him. You need to strike him. Because I grew to hate him very much. And I grew very, very bitter. But then at some point I was like, I am not afraid of you anymore. So then I will fight with him. Not intentionally. Most of the time it was because whatever, everything will go haywire. And then that was pretty much it. Like, we didn't have a really good relationship, and for the longest I just was, don't even talk to me, I don't want to know anything. And then he ended up moving to Nicaragua, back over there. And I was like, no, I'm not even going to visit.
So at that point, your parents were separated or still together?
I don't know what their arrangement was, but they were like together and not together. And so, but I just didn't want anything to do with him. Like, I was like, no, I don't want anything to do with you. You're like the terrible person ever. And that was pretty much it. And so.
How old were you at that point?
When he left, I must have been 19 at that time. Yeah, so I was about 19. Already. Yeah, so when I came back to the US and we were living together, I was 12. So between 12 and 19. And I mean, I'm in a whole different country with, like, technically, if you think about it, strangers. Yeah. Like, I'm like, I don't know. They say they're my parents.
Yeah.
But I'm like, but you're like, then you're a teenager, you're going to a different school. So it was like
so many changes.
Yeah.
So, and so at that time when he left, did he ever come back? Did you stay in touch with him?
No, he did try, but I was like, no, don't. Like, he would call me and I'd be like, don't call me, lose my number. Like, I don't want to talk to you. Like, this is not okay. I don't respect you. Like,
was he still like in the same situation over there?
As in,
meaning like drinking and still?
Yeah. I mean, not anymore as of like 10 years ago now, but yeah, he was still in the same situation. He would drink and all the stuff. So he would just try to make contact, but I would just like not answer the phone. And then I'm like, no, I don't want to deal with it. Like, even like I didn't go to Nicaragua for about like maybe 7 years after he got there, because I was like, no, I don't even want to be in the same country as him. Like, that's how much how bitter I was about it. So
how did that whole experience with your dad affect you, like in different ways? That maybe you're still even like, I feel like sometimes we're still finding out things.
Yeah, for sure, triggered. I mean, very much, because I feel like because of that, I always felt like I'm at war. Like, I have to be on like, what's the word?
Like, prepare ready, because something might happen.
Something like, and then I also kind of like took the role of like protecting my sister, because she's 4 years younger than me. So then I took that role of like protecting her. So I just kind of took that protective role of it, which I think it obviously should have been him, but yeah, so it did change a lot, because
so you mentioned like even the way you would see now men, you would think like all guys are capable of this, or maybe creating like mistrust in you.
I just didn't trust men, because I'm like, at some point you're gonna lie to me, or you're gonna, I don't know, do something. And then I'm like, no, just stay away, we're good. And so I just kind of didn't really respect them, and I didn't trust them. And so it's just been a learning curve.
So too. Did you ever reconnect with him? How do you know about him now?
Yes, I did, because so what happened was that I kind of like went back to like church and all of that. And the Lord actually asked me, he's like, hey, I need you to pray for your dad and forgive him. And I'm like, at first I'm like, the devil is talking to me, because I'm like, how dare you, Lord? How dare you ask me that? And then he asked me one more time, and then I'm like, I don't think you remember. Like, were you not there when this, right? And then I had this really long list. And so I would just be like, okay, I forgive him with like anger. And eventually it just kind of got easier, and kind of like just every night I would just sit with my little notebook. I forgive my dad. I hope you bless him, and do this whole prayer thing for him. And then I was in Connect group one day, and then I was talking to one of my friends, and I was like, I don't know how we got into a conversation, and she was asking me about it. And I was like, no, honestly, I don't need an apology from him. I've forgiven him. He's good. I pray for him, because I also hadn't really honestly reached out to connect with him.
Yeah.
And so I was like, no, I'm good. Like, he's awesome. I bless him and all of that. And then like literally, like, I want to say that was a Saturday. And then like the Monday, I am getting my car and I'm rushed because I had to go to work. And my phone rings, and I typically would recognize the number, but I just picked it up. And I'm like, hello? And so immediately I recognized the voice. And so I was like, oh, hi. And then he's like, oh, how are you? And he's like bawling on the phone. Like, I'm so sorry for being a terrible dad. And I'm like, oh, no, you're good. I have forgiven you. You're so good. You don't need to say sorry to me. Like, it's in the past, and I love you, and I hope you're good. And so we kind of started talking again, and then now, like, I know that he actually he had an accident like maybe a couple of years after that. And he ended up giving up alcohol and smoking. Wow. And so now he's like a devout Catholic, and he is like very good. So I do talk to him, not all the time because I really have a crazy schedule, but but we are like in good terms. But yeah, I wasn't expecting that, because I was like, I mean, my whole and even now, sometimes he'll bring it up like, I am so sorry that I did this, and this, and I'm like, oh, I don't even, like, honestly, now thinking about it, I'm sure there's all, because sometimes we'll sit with my sister and we're like laughing about it now, but I don't remember a lot of it. Like, I'm like, you're good. You don't need to remember them. It's in the past. I've forgiven you, and you're good.
And you're at a different place now.
And I'm a totally different place. So that's
it's
awesome.
crazy to think, how much these relationships will affect us. Specifically, when we think about fathers and daughters, I think the way that God's creation, it's so perfect and it's so beautiful, because it's supposed to be there for a very specific reason, right? It's like, okay, you as a woman, as a girl, you get so much from a relationship with your dad. Like, there's so much that should come from that, and so whenever that's not there, it creates such a deep wound in your life. And I'm hearing your stories, and my story is very different in a sense that I feel like I got pieces of both of you, to where, like, my dad wasn't a terrible dad. Maybe he wasn't the most incredible dad, but he wasn't a bad father. And I feel like sometimes there's points of life with my dad that are not there. And as I try to think back of those moments, I think that sometimes we can have, or I can have, selective memory, to where I remember all the bad, because it's helped me cope with the not having him there, or the other different things that I fail to sometimes give him credit in some areas that maybe he was, good in this area, or maybe so I have to bring myself back to remember those things. And think that it's humanity and the brokenness, right? It's not, I don't think that any of our fathers woke up one morning wanting to ruin their lives or ruin their families, or think like, I want to be the worst person I could be today, and absolutely. Like lose my family. But it's in that lack of maybe our relationship with God, maybe in, our own hurts and traumas. Like, I'm sure your dad was an alcoholic for a reason. I could only imagine what he may be. And sometimes we fail to realize that humanity and people, and the reason why maybe our parents have been the way that they are. But not denying the great impact that it caused in our lives. So for me, it was having my dad, then having my dad, much like you, you know, cheating on my mom, has had this whole life, you know, outside. My mom knew, my mom putting up with it. Then I, you know, finding out and going up to my mom and telling her, I think this is happening. And, you know, putting so much on a child.
Yes.
That's like,
That's
like you're not even thinking about, I don't know, you're just a child.
Yeah,
but now you have to face the reality of like this whole other life your father's having, you having to deal with his anger, you know, with seeing him, you know, abuse your mom and like all these different things. So for me, it was having my dad, and then having my dad just walk out of my life willingly, because life didn't go the way he wanted, or I didn't do what he wanted.
Right.
Trying to present me a different idea of what really happened. And, you know, when it's like I lifted, and then living years with the reality of like, my dad doesn't want me. Yeah. And I'm not, maybe not good enough or a priority enough in his life that I'll be worth fighting for, or that I'll be worth, you know, doing all these things. And then coming to Jesus, and like you, coming to a place where God asked me, you need to reach out to your dad. And me feeling like, but
why? Why do I have to be the bigger person?
Yeah, and I wasn't necessarily like angry like that. It was just like, why? But coming to a place where it's like, okay, because I'm forming you and I'm making you into this person, and so I need you to do this. And finding out that my dad said, in order for me to speak to her, I need her to apologize to me. Oh. And mind you, I was 9 years old when my dad was like, you know, nothing to do with her or whatever, 10.
Yeah.
And so now me wrestling with this thing of like, what am I supposed to apologize for?
Yeah.
You know, what am I like, I didn't do anything. I was a child.
You're a child, yeah.
But then feeling God really tell me over and over, because it's not about you.
Yeah.
It's about me. And if you need to apologize, you have to do it, because I want you to do it, because this is beyond you. This is about what I'm doing in your life and what I'm going to do in his life. Well, maybe he hasn't done it yet, but we're trusting the Lord. And coming to a place where, okay, I had to do that, and I had to be obedient to something I didn't want to do. And hearing you talk about forgiveness, I think sometimes it can be so hard on ourselves that we think forgiveness is just saying it one time.
No.
And like it happens, or I don't feel it, so I can't forgive. But knowing that it's such a daily choice.
Yes.
Every
it's
time
a choice.
I hear his voice, I have to like
forgive him.
I have to forgive, because it's just like it brings back. But like, okay, no,
it triggers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thinking of how that shapes our view of the world, because sometimes we focus on like just our relationship with men, which I would say yes is, you know, the first thing it does.
Yeah.
But of like the world, you know, like hearing you talk about like this heartbreak, you know, of like loving someone, and then now, how do you trust anyone?
Right.
Like when someone that was supposed to care for you and like be the person that cared for your heart and protected you from the world, like if they failed you, how do you trust anyone? You know, how have you navigated that? How have you been overcoming that, or in the process of, or what do you do when these thoughts come back to you? Like,
for me, the trust was more just to him. I never really felt it to like anybody else. It was just more to him. I feel like I can easily trust people that I know. But the whole like going into, like you said, you were praying and God asked you to pray. For me, it was like a little different. I actually went through the steps to do it, and I was very hard-headed about it. I didn't want to do it, and I had a Lisa and Zori that would just literally be like, girl, you gotta get over it, like we gotta move on, like you gotta forgive, because it's for your relationship with God, because it's not gonna work if you're holding on to this.
Absolutely.
So yeah. And then I think now for you, maybe what I was just saying, like recognizing the humanity in your dad, like he's a messed up person, as are we. That sometimes it's hard to like, you know, come to a point where it's like, because you could think, well, but I would never, and that's the point where we need to remember God's mercy over our own lives, that we think, well, I would never do that, or I would never. but we haven't walked like in their shoes, you know, and not to excuse what they've done, but to understand that, hey, we all need grace and forgiveness, and who knows what he, you know.
My dad didn't grow up with his dad. My dad's dad died before he was born. So he didn't have a dad.
Yeah.
And you would think that because he didn't, he would want to be the best, but maybe he tried the best he could.
He did,
and that's all he could give, you know, at that point. You know, I think of my dad resented his father for what he did to my grandma, for like cheating on her, for, you know, being this kind of person to her, for the way he had, you know, other kids, and basically resenting him for the same things that he did to my mom. And so it's easy for me to say, well, how could you? And then it's like, well, not everyone deals with life the same way. And so while some might spend the rest of their lives trying to redeem those things, there's some that's all they know, and they're gonna repeat, you know, what they've seen.
I mean, I think they just try to cope, because I kind of saw that everything that I hated in him, like the drinking, the partying, and all of that stuff, it's in the anger. It's literally like I went down the road of like, oh crap, like that's what I'm becoming, because I was angry, I was drinking, I was partying, because guess what, I had to somewhat try to figure out to cope. And so if I think back of like my dad, he didn't grow up with a dad either. His dad died like he was 10 years old, and then my grandma used to be a stay-at-home mom, and now she has to leave the house to provide for 2 boys that she had. And so my dad fell in with the bad crowd, and that's how he kind of coped with his situation. And so he became all of those things, and then again repeating that pattern. That's where I was like, oh no. And obviously that's where like Jesus comes in and all of that, but
seeing how easily you could, or anyone can fall,
right, which actually brings which actually reminds me that like for the longest time I didn't like I my thought of marriage was like, oh, I don't ever want to be married because I don't want a man to have that much power over me like he had over my mom. And I don't want someone to like, I don't know, like manipulate me, or like have this hold or domineering on me, or like be, or even like, because I'm thinking more on the sense of like, I feel like I'm a lot more like him in the sense of like the anger. I'm like quick to like like fight. And so I'm like, how will I be with my children? Then my children are gonna be in the same pattern. I just don't want to repeat that. And so very early on I was like, I am never getting married because of that. And so and all of that has been like a shift that I've kind of had to like learn to figure out through and work through those issues, because I just you want to break those things off of it, and so that way you're not repeating those patterns.
And there's things that you learn as you go, that maybe things you didn't recognize came from that relationship with your dad.
Absolutely.
That you didn't see 5-6 years ago, but you see them now, and you're able to pinpoint like, okay, this is because of this, you know.
Or like situations, sometimes something happens and then I'm like for example, I kind of have like a trigger in the sense of like, I am very intense and like very like, I will be in the room and I don't have a problem making the room uncomfortable. But if somebody's having a conversation and they start getting, if you will, on my perspective, a little intense and loud, I start kind of like, because I kind of go back to that moment and I have to be like, okay, calm down. It's okay.
Yeah, like being that little girl that had no control over what was happening around her. Yeah, that's insane how things we've experienced as young kids can come back, you know, as adults. And like something as simple as that can like bring you back to like a moment, an experience, and like, you know.
Yeah, like I'm like, oh, I need to get a hold of myself. Taran needs to go on a timeout. Like, put her in the corner right now. She needs to control herself. So yeah.
And I can relate a lot to that thought on marriage, because I didn't grow up wanting to get married. I wasn't like against it, but I was just like, you know, indifferent about it. Like it wasn't a dream or a goal in my life.
Yeah, no, me neither.
Yeah, because of the same reason. Because to me, I guess pulling from a little bit from what you were saying, to me it's like this thought of because this person that was supposed to be there for me and love me and protect me and did not do that and failed to do that. And everything else he did, you know, in the process and the relationship with my mom and how he, you know, was with me and whatever. Now I feel like you just always have to be prepared for what could happen,
right?
Because something is gonna happen,
right.
And so
what could go wrong,
right? And so to me, it's like I always lived my life preparing for the what if, you know,
right.
I might get married, but I better have my career, because what if this happens?
Right.
I'm not gonna be, you know, like my mom, who maybe didn't have a lot of, you know,
options.
Options in life or whatever. And so I need to make sure that I finish this and I do this before, you know, if I get married, because what if this,
right?
Even beyond, you know, relationships, I feel like in life in general, always, you know, feeling like I needed to guard my heart in such a way that it's almost like I had this feeling where I have to love people, but I can't love them to this point.
Right. Like there's a border.
There's a line. There's a line that I cannot cross, because I love this. If I love this much, then what happens when that doesn't go well, or what happens when that doesn't exist, or what happens with whatever. So I can't. So I have to love, but just till here, you know. And I have to like almost always be prepared for what can happen next.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's such a prison to live in.
Yeah.
And I think it's the beauty of God is that he gives us, you know, coming to Jesus, and it's feeling and really allowing the freedom of God to come into your life. Because to me, I went from, I don't care about getting married, I don't care about this, I don't care about that, to getting married at 21 years old.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, what? Like I didn't have a career. All these things I said I was going to do and have, I didn't have.
Right.
And it's like only God.
Yes.
Only God can take a girl who has all these fears or, you know, ideas of life and be like, it's going to be okay. Mm-hmm. You know, or even being to a place where it's like, and even if it's not okay, it will be.
Right.
Because now there's God. Now there's, you know, this Father in heaven that loves you and is going to look out for you. Mm-hmm. And thinking about God as your father, did that change how you view God as your father? Or like even when you know, maybe started going to church and understood God, did it take you a while to understand that concept?
Yes. So part of the you have to forgive him prayer was that, because I was like, no, I'm not doing that. Lord, I will do anything for you but that. Like, this is where my line is at. Like, I'm good. I don't need to do that right now. And the revelation he gave me was that if I didn't do that, the way that I felt towards him is how I viewed him. And so I had this border with him. And so I couldn't get past that, if you will, that freedom that we talk about and all of that. Because I had this line, I was like, you're here, but I will give you half of my heart. Like, I will give you this corner, but not
all of it.
Not past that, because I don't know what it, like, I think the biggest thing that I had to kind of work through was, if you will, the disappointment of the prayer of like, can you change him? That I felt like, Lord, you can do all things, but you didn't do that. So I felt like the Lord had disappointed me.
Yeah.
I had that, if you will, that anger with him. Like, you failed me then. That was my perspective. Now looking back, he answered the prayer. Yeah. Just was not in my timing.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, he had to work those things. I mean, I'm not saying he caused any of that, because he doesn't. But it's so true when the Bible talks about, like, he works all of those things to our good. Because of all of those situations, at the end of the day, he made it good. Yeah. Like, now I'm at a place that I'm like, I can fully trust God, in the sense of like, I'm like, if something goes haywire, I'm like, it's okay. I don't know how this is going to solve. I cannot see it at all, but the Lord will figure it out. Yeah. And so I had that border with him where I was like, I will give you up to here, but no more, because
I don't know,
you might disappoint me, even though I know your word says that you don't. but you might. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's like you're holding on to that. I'm gonna save myself in some.
Yeah.
In some
Which
way.
comes from because the person that should have didn't do it for
Correct.
you. Yeah. Can you relate to any of that? Do you think
To
that
me,
maybe?
I always, at the beginning of my relationship with God, I always thought the father thing was the weirdest thing. I was like, that is so weird. Like, no. And it took a while, and as I've matured, I have seen it. Like, he's always there for me, you know, and between God that loves me unconditionally and my mom that loves me right there behind him. And I know my dad still loves me, but I could see, I could trust God more, you know, and like I said, coming to a church where things were explained different and not in such a negative way, my relationship changed, and I could say God is my father.
Yeah, I would say, oh, you're making me cry. I think it's been a journey for me, because sometimes I feel like I don't know what a good dad is.
Right.
You know, I don't know what. Like, I have to bring myself back to allowing God to tell me who he is, because I have no point of reference for it.
Right.
You
Absolutely.
know? So it's not like I didn't have the most terrible father, but I also don't know what it's for a father to fight for you or love you enough to fight through things for you. So it's hard sometimes to think of like, yeah, God, I know you love me this much, but there's no point of reference, you know? And so it's like a weird spot to be in, because it's like, it's not that I don't believe it. It's that sometimes I question myself, like, do I believe it enough, you know?
Yeah.
Do I grasp this idea? Because it's hard for you to see it, to look at God as a father when you don't know the point of reference. So it's almost like allowing God to redefine that for me, and making it a new thing, you know, making it what he wants it to be, and not sometimes getting caught up in what it would look like, what it should look like. It's just like, no, God is my father, and he's redefining that for me and what that should look like. But I think that's why, as I think of all of this, it's like, man, this is why the enemy attacks families so much.
Absolutely.
Because if he can, just even us three here, you know, if out of our experiences, we can carry so much, and it can shape our lives in such a way. Like, if it wasn't for God, where would we be?
Yes. Oh,
if it wasn't for God,
not
what kind of
married,
lives
angry.
would we be living?
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
know? And so if we would have carried that on, what would it be of our, not just our lives, but our families? What kind of families would we have? What kind of children would we have, you know? And so it's like the enemy works so hard at destroying the image of family, and we have allowed it for so long. And so nowadays, I feel like we're so blinded to even what's happening in the world with men. You know, now it's become this fight of men are bad and men are horrible, and it's the patriarchy, and they're all out to get you, and everyone, you know, all men hate women, and you know, this and that. And it's such an ugly narrative, and it's such a narrative that now this new wave of feminists are carrying. And it's like, I love women, we're doing this podcast for women, you know, we believe in women. Like, I'm the first one that I'm like, we can do everything, you know, we're this, we're that. But it's like we're losing the truth of it in the process, to now think that for us to believe in ourselves, we need to attack men and attack. And I feel like the enemy is coming so strong against families and fatherhood, you know, fathers. And so it's like also our responsibility as women, and you know, even me as a mom being married, you're about to get married, you know, to carry this and change the narrative around, you know, relationships, around families, around fathers. So I would say, ask you guys, what would you say to that girl who is watching right now? Maybe not a young girl, maybe we're talking to an older woman that has lived her life with the wound of a father, you know, relationship that went wrong. Maybe it was like your relationship, maybe it was like yours, maybe it was completely different, you know, maybe it was someone that was abused by their father, maybe it's someone that just, you know, whatever the case may be, but they might still feel the effects of it very much alive and working, you know, in their lives. They still have that anger. They might still have that pain that doesn't go away. What would you tell that woman that they can do practically to work through those things?
I think you got to find that person in your life that you can talk to, that, you know, maybe somebody in the church, you know, your connect group leader, somebody who is you trust, and express it. If you keep it in, like, who's gonna help you? Like, we can help you. We can get you those steps and get you to where, in the right direction.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say don't be afraid to express those emotions to the Lord. Like, I feel like sometimes we feel like we're gonna hurt his feelings, and he's literally like trying to pull them out of us, because once they're in front of us, then we can actually like have revelation and have freedom of how those feelings translate. Like, it could be that anger that you have, that you're dealing with, that just kind of gets triggered, that he's trying to carve out of you so that you can use that, if you will, that intensity for something else. And so, like, practically, I would say journal those thoughts of this. Like, if you're angry because of a wound that a father did to you, like work through those things and ask the Holy Spirit, like, please give me revelation on how I should deal with this, because I have it in front of me and I don't know what to do. I'm mad about it and I feel XYZ situation. Because if you don't, then you're just going to continue to repeat that pattern, and it's never going to end. And I know that now, if you will, on this side, I'm like, I wish I would have done it sooner. I wish I would have had that thought of, or that revelation of like working those feelings out with the Lord, because it just brought so much freedom that I can recognize those things, in the sense of like, if something happens, I know when I'm getting triggered, but that only happened because I worked my disappointment and I worked my anger out with him, and I worked all of those things. Did that look pretty? And did that take did it go from like just one single prayer to like, oh, I got up and it's all good? No, absolutely not. That took years. And just give yourself grace, because at the end of the day, you are human, and that's why the Holy Spirit is there to guide us through those moments. And if you gotta cry and be on the floor and do all of that, do it. Like, if you have to put worship music and scream, then do it as well. Like, it doesn't matter, but work it out, because the freedom of getting or working those emotions out would be like, you won't even understand what that means.
Before we close, really quickly, as someone who at that point when you were going through situations like that did not have the tools, did not know enough, maybe didn't even have a relationship with God the way you have right now, what would you tell that little girl in the thick of it? as Caral right now, as a grown woman who's been able to work out through some of those issues, what would you tell that little girl?
I would tell her that my dad still loved me. Because that's what it was. Like, I thought he didn't love me no more. And no, my dad still does love me. And that was his thing. It wasn't my thing.
It wasn't on you. Yeah. What would you tell her? What would you tell little Mary?
Oh, what would I tell myself? I think I would just tell her it's going to be okay, and there's honestly freedom at the end of it. And right now you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, but it will come. And that sounds a little vague, but it's just so true. Like, you work through those things and you move, and you're as flexible. You're more flexible than you could imagine, because you're gonna make it.
Yeah. I would tell myself that the deepest wounds and pain would become the greatest beacons of hope and strength.
Yeah.
And that at the end of all the terrible, there's still something good that will come out of it, and that God will redeem all the ugly things and all the sad things and all the pain and turn it into something amazing that can help people. Like what we're doing right now.
Yes. That's awesome.
And we're a hot mess. Wow. I wasn't ready for these many tears.
No,
Jesus
I wasn't
Christ.
either. I was like, I was not gonna cry.
No.
This is how we started. We opened up in tears. Wow. Thank you guys. Thank you for being open and honest and willing and just sharing your tears with us. And like, I think this is healing. You know, I wanted to do this in a conversation style, because I think in something as simple as a conversation, there's so much healing that can happen, you know, as we let other people into our lives and our situations. And I know that there's people watching, there's women watching right now that can identify, that maybe are struggling with this right now, and, you know, maybe in their lives, maybe even with the lives of their children. Maybe it's a mom walking their child through, you know, a situation with their father. And so thank you for being open and honest and vulnerable. And it's a hot mess today. It's a messy one, but we just hope that you were encouraged today, even through the tears. You know, I think it's tears, not necessarily of pain and sadness, but I think they're tears that tell a story of redemption, and tell a story of how we do have a good God and a good Father. That, you know, life happens, but He has the power to grab the ugly and the painful and turn it into something that makes sense, into something that has power to help other people, to help, you know, in a redemption story in other people's lives. So maybe you've walked some of our stories, maybe you're still dealing with it, maybe the pain's still very much open and real in your life. We just want to remind you today that God loves you, that you may not fully understand what that looks like, but if you stick close enough and you keep moving forward, pushing forward in your relationship with God, God will reveal that to you. He will become that Father that maybe you didn't have. And I really believe that you can find people in your life in practical ways that can help you work these things out. That maybe you can sit down with them and tell them, you know, this is what I'm going through. This is what I'm struggling with. I'm struggling with unforgiveness. I'm struggling with anger. I'm struggling with this pain. And they can help you navigate those emotions. If you need to find therapy, if you need to find just a trusted person in your life, there are people there that you will find that can help you. And never stop learning and growing. There's so many things that I'm still finding out. Sometimes they happen and I have to start asking myself questions, and I realize where they're coming from. And I know they came from a place of pain, and I know they came, and it's an ongoing process as God continues to work in our lives, but you're not alone. And pain isn't the end, and that situation does not have to define the rest of your life. There's hope, there's healing, and most importantly, there's a good God, a good Father that you can find comfort in, and He loves you, and He will never abandon you, never leave you. And that is the truth that you can leave with today. And so we would love to pray for you. If you have any prayer requests, if you need help in any way, we would love to connect you to people, to resources. Let us know. We love you. We're here for you, and we'll see you next time.